Pretty shot of New York City at 28 past the hour. Republican frontrunner Donald Trump has spent the last 2 days defending a story he told at a rally in Alabama on Saturday night about watching, quote, thousands of people celebrate in New Jersey as the Twin Towers fell on 9/11. It's a claim he defended all weekend.
I watched when the World Trade Center came tumbling down. And I watched in Jersey City, New Jersey, where thousands and thousands of people were cheering as that building was coming down.
I saw it. It was on television.
You saw that with your own eyes?
George, it did happen. There were people that were cheering in the other side of New Jersey where you have large Arab populations.
PolitiFact reports that Trump's recollection flies in the face of all the evidence they could find, and the Washington Post fact-checker came to the same conclusion, awarding the claim 4 Pinocchios. But yesterday, Trump shot out this tweet asking the Post for an apology with a link to an article of theirs from September 18th, 2001. An excerpt reads, quote, in Jersey City, within hours of 2 jetliners plowing into the World Trade Center, law enforcement authorities detained and questioned a number of people who are allegedly seen celebrating the attacks and holding tailgate-style parties on rooftops while they watched the devastation on the other side of the river. But when MSNBC reached out to the reporter who wrote that story, he said this, quote, I do not recall anyone saying there were thousands or even hundreds of people celebrating. That was not the case, as best I can remember. Meanwhile, at a rally last night in Columbus, Ohio, Trump tripled down and read aloud from the Washington Post.
During a speech recently, I said that I saw in parts of New Jersey, Jersey City, but parts of New Jersey, I saw people getting together and in fairly large numbers celebrating as the World Trade Center was coming down, killing thousands of people, thousands and thousands of people. But the media was going crazy. They were having a field day. And one of my people came in, Mr. Trump, I have a story in the Washington Post. Washington Post. Washington Post. How good is that, right? That's good, because they do us no favors. In Jersey City, within hours of 2 jetliners plowing into the World Trade Center, law enforcement authorities detained and questioned a number of people who were allegedly seen celebrating the attacks and holding tailgate-style, tailgate, you know what that means? Tailgate. That means football games, Ohio State, thousands of people in parking lots, on roofs. Tailgate is a lot of people. Tailgate's not 2 people. And holding tailgate-style parties on rooftops while they watched the devastation on the other side of the river.
So Ben Carson also said that he saw the footage, but then later he backtracked, saying that he was hearing and thinking something differently at the time and has walked back the statements. I'll tell you what I think. I think this is what could really hurt Trump. I mean, if he's got to be smart and strong and correct. And if he's not correct, and when push comes to shove, people will coalesce around a different candidate.
And again, he's got a Washington Post article that talks about
but he was saying
several people, but it's not thousands of people.
Yeah, I actually read that whole article this morning just to get the context of it. September 18th, 2001. The piece was about Muslim Americans being swept up allegedly indiscriminately in the days after 9/11, and it said they arrested and detained some people for questioning alleged to have had these parties on their roofs. The police chief in Jersey City said he has no record of it, that it never happened. The previous internet theory was that it was in Paterson, New Jersey. That police chief came out yesterday and said he had no record of it either.
I'm just saying, I mean, if you look at Ben Carson's drop, it's when people started to see that he knew nothing what he was talking about in terms of foreign policy. And in the age of terror and the age of so many different problems that we're facing around the world, this could be, everyone wonders what could stop Trump. I don't think anyone can stop him except for him. And I think this could be really damaging if he does more like this. Do you agree?
I don't know if it'll damage
I know you think he's tapping into something.
No, you're asking. You were asking me a political question. That's like asking me if you give somebody a run on a power sweeper, they're going to pick up 5 yards if the play usually picks them up 5 yards. I mean, is this going to hurt him? No, I don't think it's going to hurt him in the short run. He's got a Washington Post article. He will always bring up the Washington Post article, but he doesn't have to be doing it. And I think it's unnecessary. And what works in primaries doesn't work in general elections. And so, and this isn't even about how many Muslim Americans are going to vote for him. This is what George W. Bush actually did figure out, is that you had to appeal to suburban, especially suburban women, if you're a Republican. And this is a sort of thing that if he is seen being exclusionary, will not only hurt him with Muslim Americans and also Asian Americans, Gene, but also with white suburban voters in, let's say, the suburbs of Philly who are up for grabs that Republicans have been chasing away for 20 years now.
This is about being right.
You know, Joe, you're absolutely right about that and the appeal to suburban voters. There's another aspect, though. What George W. Bush also figured out is that this cannot be a war between Christendom and Islam. Okay, and you know, right after 9/11, he went to the Islamic Center and he said that Islam is peace. That these you know, crazy murderous people who have hijacked Islam to commit these horrific acts. Those are the people we're at war with, and that's something. You know, that's why I think President Obama kind of has to push back against that sort of rhetoric, because that's essentially what Trump is doing, and that's what you know, some of the Republican candidates also are flirting with, and it is potentially catastrophic for the United States. It's an awful, awful thing to do.
Yeah, and I would just say it's not an either or. You can actually be for exclusion while also being for killing ISIS, and be just as bold in talking about killing ISIS as including people. You know, Mika, we were talking about what we saw. What does that?
No, I just think everyone's sort of equivocating on this. In terms of Trump,
nobody's equivocating.
Well, the bottom line is a lot of people like him. They may not agree with what he has to say, but they like that he says what he thinks.
He's strong.
That's what works for Trump. But when you're incorrect repeatedly, it's disturbing. So that's what he has to watch out for. To incorrect and mean at the same time is disturbing and possibly catastrophic for the United States. So he's got to take command, be strong, be smart, and be correct. I don't think he needs to do this. I also think that this could be really, really disruptive to his very successful campaign.
I don't think it will. I think, though, what will help him more in the long run is if he does what George W. Bush did. We were talking about that Chris Hayes, when Chris Hayes ran, gosh, it must have been a 10-minute clip of George W. Bush last week at the Islamic Center. And it was remarkable what George Bush said 7 days after 9/11, going on. And there was a Muslim American scholar that had told him, Mr. President, even women who want to go out shopping are afraid to go out with their veil. George Bush sounded, I mean, it was extraordinarily strong, saying this is not who we are.
The tragic irony of this is that the United States has done such a good job of including its Muslims. You have a less radicalized Muslim population here than anywhere in Europe. We envy what America has done with its Muslim populations, that they feel American first and Muslim second. And the kind of language that we hear from Donald Trump and have heard from some of the other candidates, flirting with, as you say, Mika, quite rightly, some of that kind of divisive language. The last thing you want to do is radicalize your Muslim population, but that's what this kind of language could do.
Okay, I've got to be one person that throws water on all of this and say that every 4 years, Republicans in primaries go out and say crazy things. And yes, sometimes Democrats in primaries go out and say crazy things. It's not going to radicalize a Muslim population. It's not. But Republicans, especially right now, need to show more responsibility. That's just my feeling. You know, you all think, and you're shaking your head, you think that this is going to cause Muslim Americans across America to radicalize. I don't think it is.
I never said any of this. I'm like on a different table than all of you. I'm talking about what he's doing that I think will hurt his campaign by being incorrect with facts. I am not talking about any of that. And every time I say something about how incorrect he is and how he's like doubling and tripling down, that's scary to people. And this is not who we are. Unfortunately, in many ways, it is. Look at the governors. Look at the people in Congress who want to keep Muslims out and stop the Syrian refugees. He's tapping into something that is very clearly there, and that might be smart. But if he's not correct, I think that could finally be damaging to his campaign, as you saw in Carson. That's all. I'll say it for the fourth time. I have nothing more to say than that's what I think could finally hurt him.
I agree with you.
If anything does.
I agree with you in the long term, but your initial question to Joe, which started all this, is does it hurt Donald Trump right now? And I think based on the evidence of the last 6 months, the answer is no. Haven't we learned that the things he said have not really hurt him in the polls? In the long run, if he makes it to a general, I agree with you. But right now, I don't think
He's
so.
been able to say things
different.
that were not true and still had a bump in the polls.
All right, pull back a little bit here and take a look at a broader focus on this. The Pentagon Inspector General is looking into whether analysts at U.S. Central Command were ordered to make changes to intelligence estimates about ISIS to present a better picture of American accomplishments. The New York Times reports, for instance, that as Iraqi forces retreated from ISIS last year, reports were changed to redeployed. And over the summer, analysts went to the Inspector General claiming to have evidence their superiors had doctored the reports to show greater progress from U.S. airstrikes. But what we don't know is if those reports swayed the Obama administration to change their approach to ISIS. The investigation was prompted by complaints from a senior Iraq analyst, Gregory Hooker. It was Hooker who in 2005...
By the way, this is amazing. This is amazing how intel follows the demands of the president, either directly or indirectly.
In 2005, spotlighted the pressure from George W. Bush's Pentagon to decrease the headcount of the military force in the run-up to Operation Iraqi Freedom. That pressure helped shape the military intelligence assessment for the Iraqi invasion. Hooker branded it as amateurish and unrealistic.
Richard, I mean, first of all, history's repeating itself here. You have a president in 2002 that wanted to go into Iraq. And intel was skewed, and everybody was pushed a certain way. Now you have a president who wanted to stay away from fighting ISIS and calls them a JV team, says they're contained, says they can't attack the United States. And this weekend, the president's saying that they're just bad guys with a bunch of guns and good social media, which is absolutely staggering when you have the president of France and everybody else across the world, but the president of the United States, calling for a sense of urgency in this war against ISIS. The president stands alone across the globe. And our Pentagon, somebody's cooking the books at the Pentagon.
Yeah. I hope it's not true. I hope it's not true, because the principal requirement of intelligence analysts is to speak truth to power. It's not to make them comfortable. It's to make them smart and aware. So I hope it's not true. And if it is true, it'd be very interesting to know exactly where the pressure is coming from, because it's corrosive. It means you can't then trust what policy is based on. So it's truly, truly a bad thing if, again, it's true. The president, let me say one thing. The White House has got to stop being sanguine. It doesn't help anyone to underplay the challenge we're against.
Why are they doing it? And they keep doing it. And this weekend, the president said they're bad guys with guns who have good social media. That is staggering to our allies. It is staggering to people like Frank Bruni, a liberal columnist. It is staggering to Dianne Feinstein, liberal Democrats. It is staggering to the world. The president's in a bubble by himself, saying that these are just bad guys with guns and good social media.
It's simply misguided because it doesn't allow the society to prepare itself psychologically and physically for the sorts of challenges it's going to face, not just tomorrow, but the day after tomorrow and the day after that. And also, it doesn't set us up to do the sort of thing we need to do in the region. We can't just do this at home. We've also got to do it there. You need a combination of policies. And again, this doesn't set the predicate for the more assertive policy we need.
And also what he's saying versus what we're actually doing sometimes doesn't sync up. You were alluding to what the president continues to say.
Obviously, you look what Vladimir Putin's been doing over the past 18 months. He's been flexing his muscles. He's become more popular at home, not only in Ukraine, but also what he was going to do in Syria. But the costs are piling up quickly for him. The commercial airliner shut down, and now the humiliation of having a plane shot out of the sky by Turkey.
Yeah, you look at both China and Russia over the past couple of years, and the fear of those countries flexing their muscles has always been that it would lead to some kind of a mistake, and that the mistake would ignite some kind of military crisis. And it looks in this case that you have jets, flying over close to borders, whether it was just inside Syria or just inside Turkey, and it's not the first time that the Turks have claimed that Russian jets have been flying over their airspace. They did this right at the beginning of the Russian exercises too, and now they've taken action. And as Richard said, just think about this for a minute. A NATO member country shoots at a Russian plane.
Let us just say, though, a NATO country, Howard Dean, that most members of NATO would just as soon leave NATO at this point, because what they're doing along the borders, what they're doing internally, what they're doing as far as shutting down any opposition. This is I mean, Turkey. This is another example of Turkey playing by its own rules.
That's true, Joe, although I don't think NATO would just as soon have Turkey leave. It's geopolitically, it's absolutely in a critical location. But you're right, Erdogan is barely a Democrat with a small d. And it's been a huge problem. He's suppressing the media, clearly having eroded civil liberties for everybody, arresting journalists that he doesn't agree with. It's a huge problem, and I think this is absolutely fascinating. I know Erdogan a little bit, and my guess is that he took umbrage at them, the Russians repeatedly violating his sovereignty, and that he decided he was going to do something about it. I'm astonished. Caddy and I were talking about this in the makeup room. I'm very, very surprised at this, that Erdogan would take on Putin, but knowing Erdogan a little bit, I was not entirely surprised.
Yeah, Willie, the arrogance Erdogan has shown through the years is just stunning. He's coming off of a big election win, and you now have two leaders that have been more than problematic for the United States of America shooting at each other.
And these are people that we're supposed to be working with now in the fight against ISIS. Russia is an awkward partner in Syria. We're supposed to be somehow making a coalition with them to go fight ISIS. Turkey, we'd like to help a little bit.
But that's
more.
one of the issues.
It just shows to the complexity.
They're on opposite sides. Erdogan is absolutely opposed to Assad, and the Russians are supporting Assad. And that's
again,
part of this.
It all goes back to Assad at the end, Caddy, doesn't it? I mean, that's one of the reasons we in America are wondering why everybody's not fighting against Assad, because, I mean, why they're not fighting against ISIS, because for a lot of people, they see ISIS as a, they don't like the means, but they see him as a great counterbalance to, they want Assad out.
The Saudis, the Qataris, the Turks see ISIS as a necessary evil to counter Assad, and more particularly the rising influence of Iran in the region. And that's why they've been very reluctant to go all in against ISIS until Assad goes. And they want to get rid. They're very nervous. The geopolitics here are really looking at Iran and the rise of Iran. But this is very complicated for the West, this whole issue of the Turks shooting down this Russian plane. And what is the implications for NATO? What are the implications for Turkey's allies? And how do we ever put pressure on Turkey to shut that 80 kilometers of border, which is where the free flow of jihadi fighters is going in and out?
Until Assad's gone, we don't. Until Assad's gone, we don't get the Saudis. Until Assad's gone, we don't get the Turks. We don't get the Qataris. We get nobody.